out there that doubt in the existence of miracles, my parents showed up this morning 10 minutes early for church. All right? And if you know anything about my family, that it was one of those true moments of, who are the, wait, those are, what? So I'm happy to have them here. Feel free to tell them how wonderful both of their children are. I know you don't really know my sister, but you know you can make something up. You know how parents are. But it did make me laugh because I have a bit in my sermon later about them. I wasn't counting on them being here. All right. So, this morning we hear another parable from Jesus about farming. And you'll remember from last week that far from simple, straightforward stories, parables were told with the intention of creating a picture of the absurd. So that the hearers would say, huh? What? And have to think and wonder deeply about what the story meant. Jesus tells parables to make us work. So I thought I'd start off the sermon just by asking if there was anything in this week's parable of the wheat and the weeds that was interesting to you. And you're always allowed to cheat and look at the gospel lesson. But is there anything any details that strikes you as interesting? Yeah, Greg.
I'm not going to leave no weeds in my garden. I'm going to pull them.
No, and that's a really good point, because where the landowner, and this goes into the farming practices of first century Mediterranean culture, which I'm sure you're all riveted by. But Greg brings up a really good point. You know, when you pull weeds as they come up, right? And that's how you would have dealt with them back then as well. And so his advice to leave them is strange, is weird. Anything else strike you as interesting?
Well, the enemy took time to plant. Wouldn't he just been easier for him to burn it all down?
Yeah, so the enemy strategy. I mean, first off, I think it's interesting that there's an enemy that comes through this field. You know, but the enemy's strategy is to disrupt rather than destroy. I think that's interesting. And this also reflects first century Mediterranean agriculture. Again, I know you love it. But there were feuds between farmers. And they would come in and they would mess with each other's fields. All right, so this was not an uncommon thing. So yeah, so a couple strange things. Anything else that's weird or interesting to you? And I'm not looking for anything in particular.
Weeds grow on their own.
Yeah, weeds usually don't need any help. That's true. You know, again, they show up. It's not a question of who planted this. It's, oh yeah, they're here again. So we've got that going on. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird things, and that's something that I encourage you as you read parables to look at them and say, huh? Why would they do that? You know, and the last one that I want to throw out, and this one has no bearing on the rest of the sermon, but I find it interesting. Who plants the seeds in this? Yeah, well, and it's even more shocking than that, though. It's the master. The master does it. He has servants, and yet he is the one in charge of planting. That's strange. Again, you would send the servants, the sower, out to do your planting. And so overall, if I were to ask you, what does this story appear to be about? What would you say on the surface of things?
Good and bad.
Good and bad, that's right. The existence and presence of evil and good, and how God will deal with them. Which on one hand, sounds fantastic, okay? I mean, this is the number one question that I get asked as a pastor. I love this one. If God is God and created everything, where does evil come from, Pastor? And then, Pastor, why does a good God allow evil to exist and thrive? Anybody else ever ask questions like this or something like it? And yet, at first glance, Jesus' explanation doesn't appear very reassuring or helpful. Jesus seems to be saying that an enemy put evil in the world, and that at the end of time, God will separate the good and the evil, and the evil will get what they have coming to them. I don't know about you, but I want God to deal with the evil now. I want God to deal with bullies in our schools now. I want Him to end wars that our young men and women are dying in now. I want God to provide a cure for cancer now. I don't want a hands-off God who says evil can wait and exist until we die or the world ends. And this is not the God that is revealed through the life and love of Jesus Christ. In Jesus, we see clearly a God who is concerned and intimately involved in people's joys and sufferings. We hear of a Jesus that condemns and works against systematic evils that afflict too many daily lives, such as racism, sexism, economic exploitation, militarism, and violence. And yet, for me, it gets even more personal when Jesus confronts and addresses the evils that reside inside of us as individuals, such as pride, judgmentalism, jealousy, greed, apathy, cruelty, and much more. I don't know about you, but some of those hit kind of close to home. So where does this leave us this morning with our simple story of good wheat and bad weeds? I wonder if I've been hearing this story incorrectly for many years. I've been looking at this story as if each stalk of wheat and each shoot of a weed is a person. I wonder if Jesus' image is much richer and more complex. What if each of us is the entire field? What if each of us is an entire field of wheat and weeds? As Christians who also happen to be Lutherans, we understand that each human being is what percent sinner and saint, Haley? 100% sinner and 100% saint all at once. We are capable and we do great acts of love, generosity, and kindness, while at the same time we are capable and do acts of cruelty, selfishness, revenge, and much more. Are we comfortable thinking of ourselves as a mixture of good and evil? Are we comfortable thinking of others as a mixture of good and evil? This realization of the holy and unholy that resides in all of us is crucial because it guards us against our oldest and most original base temptation. If you go back to the Garden of Eden, you go back Tower of Babel, all of the most basic form, what we want is to be like God. From the very beginning, we have a compulsion to judge, to draw lines, to decide who is in and who is out for God. Just like the servants in the parable, we too often are chomping at the bit to get out there at those weeds, regardless of the damage and destruction we wrought doing so. There will be judgment, right? It is necessary to eliminate evil. And yet that isn't our job. It's God alone. And it will be brought to bear on all of us. This, while really frightening, is also really good news. Because when we close our eyes for the last time and our baptisms are finally complete, the sin and crud that has plagued how we've treated ourselves and others will be removed once and for all, and we will be the creation God created us always to be. Pure love for all time, forevermore. And yet, until then, until the final harvest, what are we called to be doing? I find it fascinating that in the parable this morning, the servants are commanded to care for the entire field. As Greg pointed out, the impulse is to go out there and pull those weeds, right? And God says, no, take care of the entire field. Water it, tend it, care for it. And I wonder if this is our gospel message and our challenge for us this morning. What if we are to imagine, as we look around our daily lives, as we watch the news, what if we were to imagine that all belong to God? The weedy wheat and the weedy weeds. To put down our judgments of ourselves and others. Who are you challenged to love this week? Who are you challenged to see as valuable? Perhaps it would be a teammate. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's an adversary. Or maybe it'll be your own face in the mirror. They are loved. We are loved. You are loved. I want to end this sermon with an image. I've always been fascinated by tattoos. Many of you have had me ask what yours mean to you, and I've gotten a lot of interesting stories from you folks. And I almost got one myself my last year of college. And I had the misfortune in my brain to call my mother before I went. I was like, Mom, I'm going to get a tattoo. And she was like, enjoy paying the rest of college on your own. And I was like, you don't really mean that, do you? Silence. I have no tattoos. But now I think I know what I would get if my mom will ever let me. I want on the inside of this forearm the Latin simul justus est peccata. Simultaneously sinner and saint. This is the phrase Martin Luther used to describe all of us. And that way, whenever I shake someone's hand, extend my hand for help, or offer assistance, I would be reminded who I am, who they are, and whose we both are. Thanks be to God, and amen.
Amen.